Do you really believe you have emotional control? Or are you just holding it together until someone presses the wrong button? The truth is, most people live like emotional ticking bombs. Any critique becomes an attack. Any disagreement becomes a battle. But what if I told you it doesn't have to be this way? That there's an ancient philosophy, tested by emperors and sages, that shows the path to unshakable calm, even when everything around you falls apart? Yes, I'm talking about Stoicism. But before you think it's too philosophical or out of reach, let me ask you something straight. Do you really want to keep blowing up over every little thing, or are you finally ready to master your own mind? Because what I'm about to show you isn't just theory. It's the kind of secret that no one teaches, the power of not reacting, the secret to staying quiet without being weak, to having inner peace even in the middle of chaos, and most of all, to becoming untouchable to those who try to provoke you. If you've ever caught yourself thinking, why do I get so angry with stupid people? Or why does this still affect me so much? Then this video is for you. But stay until the end, because what you're going to learn here might be the turning point between staying a prisoner of your emotions or finally becoming their master. And if you're already enjoying this message, hit subscribe, like the video, and drop a comment saying, I choose calm. Now let's go to the root of irritation, because maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe the problem is the permission you're giving. Most people believe that anger just happens to them, like a sudden storm that comes out of nowhere. But Stoic philosophy, with its ancient wisdom, reveals a shocking truth. Anger is a choice. Yes, that's right. Marcus Aurelius, for example, said, "The disturbance is not in things themselves, but in our opinion about them." This means that when someone irritates us, what really bothers us is not what the person did, but how we interpret it. And that interpretation, surprisingly, can be trained, shaped, and even silenced. Picture this. You're in traffic, someone cuts you off, and you explode. Meanwhile, another driver breathes deeply and stays calm. The difference? One reacted automatically, the other exercised self-discipline. Stoicism teaches that emotional control is a skill, not a gift for the few. This is where the true power of perception comes in. When you change the way you see a situation, the situation itself changes. Instead of seeing an attack, you might just see a stressed-out human being, maybe even one who's suffering. The Stoics trained resilience daily, like they were working out their soul in a mental gym. Seneca used to say we should mentally prepare for the day's challenges, just like a soldier sharpens his sword before battle. That's why personal development within Stoicism begins with realizing the world isn't supposed to please us. But we can learn to move with the world, with balance, emotional intelligence, and above all, serenity. Anger, when fed, becomes an invisible prison. You think you're defending yourself, but you're actually giving away your most valuable asset, your inner peace. Epictetus reminds us that no one can hurt us without our mental consent. So next time something angers you, try this. Pause and ask yourself, do I really want to spend my energy on this? That single question starts to shift your focus from impulse to reason. Look, controlling anger doesn't mean swallowing everything silently. The Stoic way of life doesn't preach passivity, but rather emotional intelligence. It's about knowing when to act, when to speak, and especially when to let things go. A practical example? When someone tries to provoke you, instead of snapping back, look them in the eye and say, I understand what you're saying, and walk away. That's not weakness, that's mental mastery, a kind of inner strength that dissolves any conflict. And this is the point where you start realizing the problem was never the other person, but your own lack of internal preparation. When your mind is trained, no insult hits deep. Inner peace becomes unshakable, like a rock in the middle of a storm. And once you understand this, a question naturally arises. What is really under your control, and what is not? One of the greatest mindset shifts Stoic philosophy offers is this. Your energy should only be invested in what is within your control. It sounds simple, but it changes everything. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and thinker, wrote to himself that there's no use fighting against the nature of things. Rain falls, traffic jams, people say what they want, none of that is in your hands. But your response to all of it? That's your responsibility. And that's where true mental mastery begins. Imagine someone trying to control another person's behavior, like pressing invisible buttons in their head. That's like trying to hold the wind in your hands. No matter how much you want it, reality slips through. Stoic philosophy reminds us the focus must be inward, our thoughts, attitudes, and choices. And when this is put into practice, stress management becomes lighter. You realize life is unpredictable, but your inner peace doesn't have to be. Let's go practical. Someone says something offensive. The automatic reaction might be to lash out, defend yourself, feel wounded. But what's really in your control, not the person's words, only your response to them. You can breathe, smile, simply say, "All right," and move on with your day. Self-discipline is built in these small, everyday moments, where you choose to remain centered, even when surrounded by chaos. It's like being the captain of your own ship in the middle of a storm. This logic also applies to anxiety, which often stems from trying to predict, control, or anticipate the future. Seneca said we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And if you think about it, most of your daily worries are about things beyond your reach. Other people's opinions, the news, uncertain outcomes. Training your mind to focus on the present is liberating. That's applied Stoicism, bringing your awareness back to what really matters. It's on this path that you develop solid mental strength. When you stop wasting energy trying to change the external world, you free up energy to transform your internal world. The Stoic way of life is about that, turning the gaze inward, aligning thought with action, and finding serenity in the middle of confusion. The secret lies in knowing the difference between reacting impulsively and responding with wisdom. One leads to exhaustion, the other to lasting peace. And if this all sounds too hard, take a breath. Because there's a simple, powerful, ancient technique the Stoics use to stay emotionally balanced, even in the most stressful moments. A practice that fits any routine and can completely change the way you handle anger and daily tension. There's a quiet power that few master, but the great sages of Stoic philosophy practiced it every day. The pause. Yes, pausing for a moment before reacting may seem like a small thing, but it's one of the greatest signs of mental strength anyone can develop. Even as emperor, Marcus Aurelius often chose silence over an impulsive reaction. He knew that the first reaction is usually the least wise. The pause gives reason a chance to take the place of impulse. Think about how most arguments start. Someone says something rude, you fire back instantly, no filter, and boom, conflict ignites. Now imagine that in that very moment you breathe, count to 3, or even sip some water before responding. That changes everything. This pause is the space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your power. The Stoics called it mindful attention, being present enough to notice what's rising before it takes control. Epictetus taught that when anger arises, the wise person watches it as if from the outside, like a visitor knocking at the door, not an intruder barging in. That metaphor is powerful. Next time you feel anger creeping in, just notice what's happening inside. I'm getting irritated. That simple acknowledgement already breaks the automatic loop. It's real-time resilience training. In practice, you can use this in everyday situations. In a tense meeting, when someone cuts you off mid-sentence, when you get a harsh message on WhatsApp. Instead of replying impulsively, lock your phone for 2 minutes, breathe, and decide if it's really worth it. Many times, silence is the best answer, because it protects your inner peace and disarms conflict. As Seneca said, "Nothing is more admirable than remaining calm amid chaos." This kind of mental discipline starts with a simple choice, not being a slave to your impulses. The Stoic life philosophy teaches that there's no freedom without self-control. That's why so many wise men and women throughout history were known for their unshakable calm. Not because they didn't feel anything, but because they trained themselves not to surrender to the first wave of emotion. And that kind of training is available to anyone, including you. Over time, this habit of pausing becomes second nature. You start acting with more strategy, more emotional intelligence, more clarity, and then something interesting happens. What used to destabilize you starts to lose its power. Anger, insult, provocation, it all starts to bounce off, Because when you learn to pause, you learn to shield your heart. And in that state of inner protection, no one can offend you anymore. Have you ever stopped to realize that offense only works when it finds space inside you? This is one of the most powerful ideas in Stoic philosophy. No one has the power to hurt you emotionally without your permission. Epictetus said it's not external events that disturb us, but our judgment about them. In other words, what hurts isn't what someone said, but what you allowed those words to mean. Real emotional control begins when you decide not to hand over the keys to your peace to anyone. Now picture an invisible armor around you. It's not made of iron or stone, but of something much stronger: self-awareness. This mental shield doesn't make you cold or insensitive. It simply keeps you from being manipulated by others' negativity. When you internalize the principles of Stoic philosophy, you begin to see that not every attack deserves a response, and not every criticism holds truth. Most of the time, what others project onto you says more about them than it ever says about you. Practical example: someone calls you incompetent. If you know who you are and trust your abilities, why would that get to you? A shielded heart doesn't react, it reflects. There's no need to prove anything to anyone. This is self-discipline in practice, resisting the urge to react just to satisfy your ego. Remember, what you absorb becomes a part of you, so choose carefully what's worth letting in. True mental strength lies in being selective with the emotions you feed, and the more you practice this, the clearer it becomes who really holds the power over your mind: you. As you cultivate this state of serenity, you'll notice how provocations lose their impact. They bounce off, fade, disappear. It's as if your mind says, "That doesn't serve me, thanks though." That's living with inner peace. It's mastering your mind, even when everything around you tries to steal your calm. Many people think being emotionally invulnerable means becoming a rock. But it's actually the opposite. Stoicism doesn't invite you to be cold, it teaches you to be stable, to keep your heart open but firm, to be kind but not weak, to be understanding but not permissive. That shift transforms how you deal with difficult people. You stop reacting and start choosing, and conscious choice is the true foundation of personal growth. This practice even transforms toxic environments, because when you stop getting triggered, you become a mirror. People start to see in themselves what they tried to project onto you, and that in itself is already a powerful kind of resilience training. And through that training, you begin to realize that every annoyance might actually be a stepping stone to your evolution. Stoic philosophy teaches us that every moment of discomfort is a disguised opportunity. It might sound strange at first, but when someone irritates you, they're actually giving you a free workout in patience. The Stoics saw the world's provocations as if they were gym exercises. Uncomfortable, yes, but necessary for growth. Seneca said, "The wise man is immune to insult, not because it doesn't exist, but because he turns it into virtue." And that changes everything. Picture a common scenario. A family member keeps provoking you over and over. You can choose to explode, complain, or train your mind. See that situation as a chance to exercise emotional control, to practice compassion, to build self-discipline. That's the real power of perception. The discomfort becomes a tool, the stress becomes a lab, and the challenge becomes a teacher. Every difficult person is in practice a personal trainer for your inner peace. It's not easy, of course, but nobody said it would be. Personal development requires effort, repetition, consistency. And Stoic philosophy is like hiking up a mountain. It takes preparation, but it leads you somewhere higher. When you choose to turn anger into self-knowledge, you start to see patterns. You notice you always react the same way to the same triggers. And then you begin to rewrite the script. Growth begins when you admit your mind needs training just like your body. Epictetus compared life to the Olympic Games. If you want to grow, prepare for pressure, discomfort, and tests. An insult becomes a test of humility. A criticism becomes a test of self-confidence. A betrayal becomes a test of forgiveness. It's not about accepting everything in silence. It's about refusing to let anything throw you off course. Emotional intelligence means responding with strategy and awareness, not with explosions and regret. Here's a practical example. Someone leaves a passive-aggressive comment at work. Instead of spending the day ruminating or jumping into conflict, treat it like a mental detachment drill. Mentally say, "Thanks for the lesson." That breaks the reactive loop and puts you back in control. Over time, your mind gets used to seeing challenges as steps upward, and suddenly what used to knock you down now lifts you higher. And when this mindset becomes your new normal, you start experiencing a different kind of peace. Not the kind that depends on silence around you, but the kind that comes from silence within. And it's that inner serenity that gradually reveals itself as the greatest of all victories, not one that requires external conquest, but a power that grows from within. Most people think winning means shouting louder, hitting harder, or convincing others by force. But the Stoics saw victory very differently. To win is to master yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "He who conquers himself is mightier than he who conquers an empire." And that's not just a poetic quote, it's a life practice. When you remain calm under pressure, you prove to yourself that your inner peace is worth more than any argument. This serenity doesn't mean apathy. On the contrary, it means choosing your battles wisely, not letting petty provocations drag you down, knowing exactly where your energy is best spent. That's pure emotional intelligence. Stoic philosophy shows us that true emotional freedom begins when you understand that not everything requires a reaction. And even more, that silence can be a far more powerful answer than 1,000 angry words. Imagine living in a state where no criticism shakes you, no compliment inflates you, no injustice destabilizes you. Sounds impossible. It's what the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakable serenity. And this state isn't out of reach. It's built in everyday life, in chaotic traffic, in harsh emails, in tough conversations with loved ones. It's the result of constant resilience training, where you put everything you've learned about emotional control, mental discipline, and self-awareness into practice. Serenity is also a form of leadership. When you stay calm in tense situations, the people around you tend to calm down too. Your posture becomes an example. Your energy influences others. Your behavior inspires. That's personal development in motion. And then you realize you don't need to dominate others to have power. Mastering yourself is enough. That shift in mindset is revolutionary, and yet incredibly practical. If someone challenges you and you don't respond in kind, that's not weakness. That's mental strength. It's knowing that fighting fire with fire only leads to more destruction. But responding with calm, presence, and clarity, that truly changes the dynamic. This way of life, rooted in Stoicism, prepares you for the real world where conflict is inevitable. But losing your peace doesn't have to be. You can walk away from any situation stronger than you entered. And the most beautiful part is that when you start living with serenity, you no longer crave approval, reactions, applause, or criticism. You live in peace with who you are. And that, my friend, is the ultimate triumph. Because in that quiet, steady place, no one can throw you off balance anymore. And that's where the transformation truly begins. Now that you've seen the power behind emotional control, the real question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you keep letting others push your buttons, or are you ready to start training your mind like a true Stoic? The choice is yours, but know this: if you don't master yourself, you'll end up being ruled by everything. Little insults, petty criticism, other people's moods. They all become chains when you haven't learned to protect your inner peace. Have you ever stopped to think how many times you've lost your calm over something meaningless? How many unnecessary conversations, sleepless nights, and built-up stress, all because you reacted without thinking? It's time to flip the script. Stoicism isn't just a philosophy. It's a real-life strategy to live with emotional intelligence, lightness, and above all, inner strength. But this power only grows when you take action, when you apply. So tell me in the comments, what situation tends to throw you off balance the most, and what will you do differently starting today? I want to hear your commitment, and if this video made sense to you, share it with someone who's always blowing up over the smallest things. Because when you learn to stay calm, life changes completely. Oh, and make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and stick around, because here, you'll keep learning how to master your mind and protect the peace no one else can take from you.